right, and we're back. Well, I guess we're doing bi-weekly, episode 2. So this week we got myself, Nicole, and Gabby on. We're gonna hit a few topics. So let's start and dive in. So the biggest topic of the last 2 weeks has been Threads, the Threads versus Twitter war, the Elon versus Zuck war. We've all used the product. We've seen a couple other competitors pop up. So we'd love to start, I guess, Gabby, where your head's at on this one.
Where am I? I think I'm kind of like in the camp of like Twitter for me was just breaking and becoming so hard to use, navigate. Like, I don't know, Threads feels like a breath of fresh air. Some of it might be just because of like, I have a smaller account right now. It feels very curated to just like the people you already knew. Like, so I guess I miss that from Twitter where like you get the whole universe of like what's trending and what people are talking about. But like, at least at a moment where there feels like there's so much noise and so many apps to download, like it feels like a nice quieter space for a little bit. I know it'll change, but feels a little different than Twitter. I think also like someone had this post on Threads that was like, you kind of have to be, how can you be a billionaire that's like ruined a platform so bad that people want to go back to a platform and a company that they've kind of hated for the last 5 years? And like, I think that's really telling, right? Like if you told me at the beginning of this year that we'd all be cheering for like Zuck over Elon, like maybe you would have seen it, but like not to the extent that like we've seen for 100 million people that kind of opt in really quickly.
Yeah, Nicole, you got 50,000 followers on Twitter. So how do you feel about this one?
I actually, so Threads I haven't quite gotten up to speed with. My Threads, like actual feed, still seems to be people I don't know. So I don't know.
Too. It says my Instagram's private, so I don't have a lot of friends on Instagram.
Oh, that's why. Wait, no, mine's public though. My business one is public. So I'm like, wait, that doesn't add up. But I don't know. Anyway, when I scroll through my feed on Threads, it feels very random. Like I don't know who those people are. I imagine it will get smarter on what I like if I were to like engage with the platform. But right now it feels, just very random. And also Threads, the way that it's trending for me is less informational and more like silly Twitter, right? And so like it doesn't feel like when I pop onto Threads in the morning to get my news, I'm not getting that, right? Like so I still go to Twitter anyway because Twitter is where basically all the information on BC tech and startups still lives. And so I have this like hot take. I don't think Threads is going to take over BC tech and startup Twitter. I don't know if it will. I think
I don't think that's a hot take though. Like I think Threads will do really well for younger people. So I play basketball and like in my basketball group, we have a lot of kids who are like 23 to 28 and a lot of them didn't go through the Twitter wave. And they're now getting onto Threads similar to our intern class. And like now it's like their new introduction. But I think people who have existed on Twitter, particularly professionals, where we do get our news and is our source, like Threads is just not going to be that, right? Threads is going to be a place kind of like early Facebook, MySpace, where you're posting on each other's wall. Like even some people on Twitter who are now on Threads, they're posting much sillier crap. It almost feels like you feel like your parents aren't in the room, so now you can say what you want to say on Threads.
Facebook statuses.
It feels like it's more like personal Twitter, whereas like Twitter itself is still like the professional, like you get your news. It's like kind of the megaphone to the world. Whereas like at least right now, Threads feels like a conversation with friends. And you're right, it does feel very like MySpace or like let me just be fun and like have a good time and like not all of the other stuff. So I totally agree with that. I
mean, I remember when we used to post on each other's like Facebook walls and it was like you were texting somebody. You're like, yo, I'll be over in 5 minutes.
I know.
Like, we shouldn't be saying these things publicly, but we were.
The psych around like what humans were doing on Facebook is really interesting. It's like, remember we did this poke wars?
Yeah, love that. Yep, the poke wars.
Why did we do that? Like,
yeah, or like when your status update was like Gabby is, and then like whatever it was.
Like the big one was until you make the relationship status change on Facebook, it wasn't real.
Oh my god,
I feel like it's complicated.
You know that
I guess it goes to like
but they didn't know who.
Yeah, and it goes to like the bigger conversation around social media in general. And obviously, as investors, we see a ton of consumer social. We're looking at a couple of deals now in space. Like, what are your guys' thoughts around consumer social? I think the last decade, really outside of TikTok, you probably haven't got a new player we've seen others like Be Real die, Clubhouse die. They're around, but they're not as active. So like, what do you, how do you guys like think about consumer social in general?
I can kind of stepping back. I think like as a society, like we're starting to get to a point where like maybe in 20 years, 30, 40 years, we'll look back at social as like cigarettes at one point, like in terms of like how it impacts people's mental health and just like quality of life and people like having all these ways to be connected, but feeling lonelier than ever. And so I don't know, I feel like, I don't know if I know how I feel about social, but I think like we're getting to a point where like people are so inundated and like overwhelmed that like only one will win in the end. Like, I think you have to have one platform where everyone's on. But I think like the nature of how we use social will start to change. Like, maybe not being on it as much as we are in some ways.
Consumer social will be cigarettes. So that's a quote.
Yeah.
Tweet it. Thread
it. Nicole, what about you?
I don't know. I don't necessarily know that I have the belief that one platform will win over others. I think different platforms are always going to exist for different use cases. I think it's similar to what we're seeing with like Threads and versus Twitter is like people build the psychology around a certain app and what it's used for, and it's hard to break that, right? You saw probably the same for like Instagram stories versus Snapchat stories, right? It's like each have their own use case to people. So I don't necessarily know that we'll ever have a consolidated platform for all use cases. But I do think that people are always going to default back to the ones that they already know. So I think there's going to be pops in consumer social apps, and then they're going to come back down, similar to how we saw Be Real, Clubhouse, others, unless they're truly doing something different. So when TikTok entered the space, no one was doing short form video, right? And like Vine had tried it at a time, but didn't succeed probably because of the like hardware and tech at the time. But then TikTok came in and sort of added a new feature set, and that's why that stuck, right? And so I think unless you're doing... I
feel like Clubhouse was different though. I was surprised that Clubhouse died because I felt like audio was unique.
It was really, and I think there were a lot of people betting on like the medium of social being audio, and then like kind of betting more on
the AirPods, right? They're like, oh, the AirPods are going to change advertising because people wear them all the time.
Yeah. I don't know. Then Twitter Spaces came about.
And died. I feel like nobody uses Twitter Spaces anymore.
I wonder though, like, had COVID not happened, would Clubhouse have become a thing in the first place? Because like when I first got on it was like March, April 2020. Everyone's at home. You literally have nothing else to do, and it becomes the one place where you can like hear people and kind of have random interactions. And so had COVID not been like the place it started, like would it have popped off the way that it did?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I thought like it was entertaining. You did learn a lot. It was cool. I mean, the one thing I didn't like was how long they lasted. Like people were on this thing for like 2, 3, 4 hours. It was very clear people were not working jobs. But I did think it was like actually really fascinating. Like to me, I didn't get why it couldn't work given how much podcasts have been blowing up, right? Audio, video like has audio, and yes, like TikTok is known for dancing. Like if you think about like the All In podcast and all these other ones that now have millions of followers, and some people watch them on YouTube, a lot of people just listen to them. I thought the Clubhouse, like to me, had probably the best chance. Be Real, I thought it had no chance. I thought, taking a photo was no different than Instagram. I think, All In podcast kind of talked about that, like Threads versus Twitter, like what lasts long term. Like you have to create a new function, right? And like Threads doesn't create that new function, which I think will be their downfall. But like, to Nicole's point, like Snapchat, I thought Snapchat would die with IG Reels. Like I thought there was no way, but like Gen Z has kept Snapchat alive. And so I think to your point, like once you kind of get that defined cohort, it's really hard to break that trend.
Yeah. I also do, for what it's worth, think there will be a Clubhouse that succeeds in the future. I think it could be similar to a Vine TikTok situation where like timing might not be right and like consumers didn't grasp it the way that they should, or however they like rolled it out. But I think there will be an audio app that wins in the future.
Do you think it'll coincide with the new product from Apple? And like I forget what it's called. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the headset?
Yeah, like maybe in order for that medium to work, like you actually need the new sort of like interface to interact with it, and then it becomes like this net new platform that then everyone opts into. And they win like Gen Alpha and like that new cohort, and that becomes sort of
Gen Alpha.
Yeah.
Or, whatever.
Yeah. Could be.
Interesting. TBD, a lot of unknowns. Consumer social is super hard.
Yeah.
As consumers, I agree with Gabby in terms of like, I think there are a lot of negatives that we're seeing, particularly for Gen Z, and you look at higher depression rates and a lot of just like worse things. But on the flip side, I think similar to the phone, I don't think it can be stopped. I personally don't think consumer social will go away anytime soon. And, maybe it's less like cigarettes, like plenty of people still smoke them. There's a lot less, but I think that's also changed, right? Because now people are like, now cannabis is legal, now people are doing jewels. And so that habit hasn't changed, like the form of it has changed, but I don't think consumer social will go away. Like maybe just like the archetype of like how we consume it will change, but I think it's kind of here to stay for the long term. Another hot topic has obviously been AI. We've started to see a lot more deals in the space. I think our last 2 deals were in AI companies. So like, what is, we can kind of start high level. How do you guys feel about it? Is it a hype cycle? Is it not a hype cycle? And then we can kind of get into some of the things that we're seeing within the AI space.
I'll let Nicole jump in. I know she's got a lot of hot takes on this one.
I think generally across the team, I tend to be the more skeptical one.
She's a banker.
I'm gotten better, but I just tend to be the more skeptical one. I think when it comes to these hype cycles, I just can't buy into them the same way. And I'm always trying to balance like being a venture capitalist that's supposed to invest in new tech, but also like being a healthy skeptic. And I think the both don't jive as well as they probably should. I think for this AI cycle is like, this to me is the definition of a bubble, right? Like if you're just looking at the valuations that are happening for the traction that these businesses have and the pace at which investments are happening, like the capital flowing in with very little diligence is very similar to what happened in Web3. I think there's no doubt that AI will be a useful technology. I still believe that to be the case for blockchain. I just think that the hype around it is not what's going to be helpful in the future, right? And it's the same thing that happened, like blockchain Web3 still exists and the people who should be innovating in the space are now, right? They've just like trimmed the fat. And the same thing is going to happen with AI is I think everybody's crowding towards it. But eventually what's going to happen is the fat is going to go away and the key innovators are going to be in the space changing what needs to be changed. But I think fundamentally is I just don't believe humans when they dive so headfirst into something so quickly because inevitably it's going to come down. And I think I just think for me, the hardest part about making investments in the AI space right now at high valuations with little diligences and little traction is at some point you have to believe that your company on a growth perspective can outpace the bubble bursting so that they can grow into their valuation, right? And I think that's the hardest part to get around, right? It's like you really have to believe that they are going to grow into their valuation faster than the bubble bursts. So I don't know, that's really hard to do. It's really hard to grow a venture backable business on a normal pacing, but then to try to outpace a bubble is like, more than defying gravity, right? Like you're trying to go to another solar system. So like that to me is where I get a bit of anxiety.
What about you, Gabby?
I feel similarly in some ways, right? Like I do believe we're in a big bubble right now. And just like Web3, we're going to go really far, really fast, very high valuations, crazy sort of like follow-on rounds with little traction. Kind of just like this is the exciting place to put capital. And there are really incredibly smart people starting companies, like even in our own pipeline. I don't think we've seen this many repeat founders, people who've been building in AI for a long time. Because again, this has been around for decades. People who've done deep research in the space, whether they're PhDs or whether they've worked at some of these like really deep tech groups at large tech companies building new startups. So I think that I see a lot of that excitement. I think where I start to feel some of that anxiety that Nicole feels is that the half-life AI and the pace we're moving at is shortening the half-life of companies. So if today we're seeing a business that can like effectively create what Firefly or other AI companies have done building on top of ChatGPT, but do it quicker, faster, better, you invest in that business, who's to say the next iteration won't come along as the underlying technology gets commoditized? Where then does your investment go? How far have they gotten in their own traction cycle before, the next wave starts to come through? And so I think like we can't stop AI, and the adoption of AI from enterprises has been really exciting. But at the same time, I think the questions venture capitalists will sometimes ask about like, what if Google builds this, or what if Microsoft does this, or what if like Salesforce adds this to their product? Those are like real questions now, where before I think they were kind of lazy. And so I think those incumbent pressures and fears come to light a little bit more in the space, where you can out innovate in some ways, but like kind of like with Threads, like if you've got that built-in distribution and you add a new product or feature, like you kind of can't do too much in some ways. So really, really challenging, I think, to like navigate the optimism with some of the like pragmatism too.
I thought what makes it hard is like so much of it is pre-product or pre-launch. And the same was true for Web3. But in Web3, there wasn't this fear that like, hey, you're pre-launch, like, will this product matter in 6 months? Right. And now, like, especially the seed stage, pre-seed stage that we're at with AI, some of these pre-launch, like literally in 6 months, we have no idea what ChatGPT or Google or Microsoft are going to release. And it's like, this product could just be irrelevant. I think that is a big fear. I think it's something that a lot of VCs really haven't had to think about, even if you think about like the '01 bubble, where people creating these internet companies, like that pace, like just wasn't at this pace. And so it was never a concern. And so I think you've added a new risk factor to investing that probably the majority of investors have never really had to think about. And so I think to that point, like it does make it even more critical that you focus on the founder, because like, regardless if you believe in the problem or solution and the technology, like you've got to believe that that founder can make pivots and adjust, because the market that they're going to be in is for sure going to change 1, 2, 3 times over the next, 5 to 10 years that they're building that product in.
Yeah. I also think there's a lot of questions here around regulation. And I think similar was true of sort of Web3, right? Is certain regulation could make these businesses obsolete in a second, right? And so there's that element as well, where it's like no one knows. Of course, that's a bit far out because regulation is always slow, but
that's
something
why we
to
invest
consider.
in a regulation AI business.
Well, there you go.
And I guess like from a deal flow perspective, whether it's AI or not AI, like let's share like what are we seeing for deal flow? Is the market back? Is it not back? How do we feel?
Go ahead, Gabby.
I can do it. I don't know about you guys, but it feels like this last 2 weeks have been probably the busiest we've had all year in some ways. And I think there's a couple of factors. We're in like late summer prior to the fall when most people want to raise. And so people are trying to get ahead of some of that. I think we're kind of past the initial like shock to the system that like SVB had sort of like early mid-year.
That feels like so long ago.
I know. It really wasn't in some ways. As well as like we're kind of getting to that point in the cycle where companies who already raised and extended runway now need capital, or companies, or a lot of people who've left their old companies are now starting companies. And I think that's been a big trend we haven't seen as much in the last couple of years, where great operators are just going off and starting their own businesses. So I think that archetype of former founders or experienced operators has been something that's really exciting in the pipeline.
Seeing a lot more co-founder split ups, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Nicole, what are you saying?
I think generally, and it seems like the market is seeing this as well, is we're seeing a lot of pre-seed, very early deals. It doesn't seem like we've been able to see true seed deals that have some traction and a few customers. Whereas I feel like in the past we were able to find those quality deals, and it seems like we're not able to find those. And I don't know if that's because of timing of like the operators coming into the space and building, net new companies. And I'm not sure, but it feels like the deals that we're seeing with the best founders are just super early. And I don't know, it's one of those things where it's like in a difficult market, it's easier to raise when you're just an idea than if you have a little bit of traction, right? Like that's like the weird thing about venture is like when you have a little bit of traction, there's something to go off of, right? And so unless it's stellar, the answer is probably going to be no. Whereas like if you're just an idea phase company, like a pre-seed company, there's nothing to go off of, right? So you're just banking on the founder being able to make it happen. And so it's this weird thing where a pre-seed deal is almost easier to underwrite than a seed deal with a bit of traction. And so I think because of the market dynamics and the capital constraints, that's where a lot of people are netting out more on the pre-seed underwriting than seed underwriting. Because inevitably it is hard to build in this market, right? So your seed metrics and A metrics are probably going to be a bit more difficult to hit.
Yeah, and you shared a chart this morning from Carta. Seed deal volume is down 45%, I think, from 2021, which is interesting because like our deal volume is higher. So like last year we saw 3,700 deals. We're on track to kind of see 4,000 plus deals this year. But like our deals that we've closed is down, right? I think we've closed 4 or 5 deals to date. Typically we do a deal a month. And so like, I don't know if it's like the bar is getting higher, is deal quality getting worse, like in the general market? I feel like everybody's just done way less deals, pacing slower. I think part of it is like people know they don't want to go back and fundraise. So they're definitely like doing less deals. So there is that, like, I think a lot of founders forget, like, we're very similar to founders. We have to go out and raise capital every 2 to 3 years as well and hit certain metrics in order to raise that next fund. So it's pretty similar. But yeah, I would agree. I think we're definitely seeing a split pre-seed, and then you're kind of going to like seed plus, right? So seed companies that couldn't get to A metrics because it used to be $1 million ARR, now it's $2 million plus ARR, and so you need a seed plus round. But like that, like true seed, call it 5 to 30K MRR, it just seems to be pretty rare right now, for better or for worse. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's something that we just aren't used to. So we have to adapt to it.
I mean, it's super interesting because I think even at some point last year, we were saying, or maybe 2 years ago,
the pre-seed would go away.
Pre-seed would go away, right? It seems like pre-seed is the thing that's going to say. But some of it at the time was, it seemed like the best founders, with whatever track record or where they're coming from, were immediately jumping to seed. And so now they are the seed pluses. And so then today, if we've got all these folks at pre-seed, then does the seed market start to come back in the next 6 to 9 months as those folks then start to go back? And
I think seed in 2024, like true seed, is going to be a big year. And I agree, because like the best founders were raising 4 to 5 million on a piece of paper, right? And now, because of the risk appetite, they're raising 1 to 2 million on an 8 to 10 posts for the same business they would have raised 3 to 5 million on 15 to 20 posts, a year and a half ago. So I think, part of it is like, yeah, like those rounds are just gone. But I'm, to your point, very excited for 2024 true seeds.
Yeah, it should be a big year.
Should be,
right? In theory, like the best founders raise, that's going to be their 24 months. Like, it should be. And if it's not, I don't know where they all went.
2025.
Just keep pushing it down the road,
Yeah,
And that we might need Series A, B, and C to start picking up again. So that because I think a lot of those funds now are looking earlier. We are starting to go even earlier because there's such a gulf of companies doing well at that stage that they're still looking for where there's an opportunity to like make any great investments.
Yep.
Yeah.
And a big part of our process for deals is our interns do a lot of our memo work. So I wanted to hit a little bit on the intern program. So we're in our 17 class right now, which is the summer class. We're recruiting for our 18 class, which is the fall class. We just sent out first round offers yesterday. So I don't know which way you want to start. We can either start with like, what do we have the intern class do? Just talking about the existing one, or I guess like let's start like about the intern application process, because a lot of people are asking, like, how do you guys go through 1,000 resumes? How do you guys do 3 intern classes a year? We've now had 99 intern alums over a 5-year period. And so people they're fascinated by it. So I figured we should hit on it. Nicole runs our intern program now. So I'll let you why don't we kick it off with like, just like the application process and like, how do we even do the intern program at Harlem Capital?
So our intern program, it's a actual well-oiled machine. And I don't actually do the application process, like logistics. That's Gabby's forte. So Gabby, I don't know if you want to talk about all the innovative things that you've done for our process that have led to us being able to review 1,000 resumes
every 3 months.
Every 3 months.
But yeah, it's pretty simple in some ways. So we get the 1,000 resumes, simple drop on our website. We compile all of those together, whittle down also just like based on like some really simple requirements. So like I think one of the biggest tips I will always tell people is like, if we say to submit it as a PDF, like submit it as a PDF. When it's not, like we can't really get through them in the same way. And I think attention to detail is something we look for in our interns. And so just how you show up in the application process like means a lot to us too.
Did you apply on time?
Exactly. Yeah. If it's late, like a minute late, like it's not going to work. But anyway, after that, we get through all of the resumes. We divide them across the team. So all of them are getting looked at. And then through like some nifty Zapier applications and connections, we're able to make sure that it's a seamless process. So there's a timeline where everyone gets to review. Then we go through our video submission process. So that was a new ad, kind of maybe class 12 or 13-ish, where instead of doing live interviews, we had people submit videos with specific questions and the answer.
Game changer.
Yeah, super helpful.
Yeah.
And I think we hesitated to do that before COVID, but I think after everyone just like started being on video all the time, it just made more sense. And I think helps to be a little bit more fair, because then everyone can kind of see all of those videos and not just like one interview making that call. After that, then we do a presentation. So 3-page memo of a market overview and a company that the intern wants to pitch. Some of those end up being companies in our diligence process too. So that's always like a fun thing to see. Okay, who's really got a pulse on like what's happening in the market. And then we do our final interview in front of the whole team, where we ask questions, dive into how you think about venture and how you think about evaluating companies, and then make our picks from there. So yeah, I'd say through time, it's become a really seamless process where we're able to like run on autopilot in some ways, but do take a lot of care and time to craft a really strong class and program and help to teach people about venture so that they can go off and join those roles at different funds too.
And that's how we get it from 1,000 to a 6, which is kind of crazy. And Gabby passes off to Nicole, and Nicole gets those 6 in order.
Yeah. And so then once we have the 6, the way that the internship is structured, and I should note, I think we shout this from the rooftops, but me and Gabby came from the intern class as well. Gabby was class 1, I was class 8. And so it definitely is a pipeline for us in a lot of ways, and a lot of other firms as well, which we pride ourselves on. But the way it works is once you get onboarded, there's 2 main things that you do. So there's deal work, and then there's a project that you do. And so on the project side of things, you get paired with a full-time Harlem Capital team member that you meet with weekly. The projects change every term, but they are things like our podcast, which we used to have our interns do. It could be a blog post. It could be a research report. It could be various different things that at the time the team needs. And so I think we have a couple interns right now doing like AI research projects, right? And that's because it's a hot topic that we want to learn about, something new for us. And so you pair up with a team member, you meet weekly, and over the 10 weeks, you basically complete a project that you then present to the team at the end. And a lot of them we also publish publicly. So you'll see on a lot of our blog posts or our reports, it will give kudos to an intern who helped us make that come to life. So that's the project front. And then on the deal work front, it's sort of a round robin where depending on the deals that are coming through, you get put on them to be on, initial founder calls, do pre-memo work, do IC memo work. And basically we take a lot of pride in when you are onboarded as an intern, you're treated like a full-time employee, which is why it's such a good venture experience. It's if you create an IC page, right, like you do the whole market section, you're going to be the one who's presenting that to the team, right? It's not, me and Gabby are not going to be the ones who are taking your pages after you do them, which I think is honestly really refreshing. It's like you have autonomy to create your pages and you also get credit for those pages. And that's not like banking where you're the brains behind everything, but you don't get to say a word on any call. Here, we actually make you speak. And you're also the one answering questions, right? So if the team has questions on your comp page, you're going to be the one who's taking that over. So you very much get a holistic experience of what venture is like, right? Because it's not just deal work. It is also project work. It's all the other things that you don't see behind the scenes. And so we really pride ourselves in giving you that autonomy and that full experience. And there are a lot of other like little things that you do, but I'd say high level, that's what the experience is like.
Yeah, I think I'll wrap it with like a big question I get, particularly from a lot of fund managers, is I actually had a call yesterday around like, is it worth it, right? I think one of the worst parts of venture is talent management. And as bad as banking and PE is, like, I think they've done a pretty good job at like getting what they want to get out of talent, right? It may not always align to what the talent wants, but they know exactly what they're doing to get that talent. I think venture hasn't been as intentional. And so when people ask like, hey, like, is it worth it? You've had, we've probably reviewed 10,000, applications, over 12,000 actually over the last 5 years. I think, there's a few ways I think about ROI as like a fund manager. I think one, there's like, what is the direct output, right? And so typically the interview process that Gabby mentioned, right? Resume reviews, 2 hours, video reviews, an hour, final interviews, I think are 4 hours, right? So call it like 8 to 10 hours per team member, over 4 week, per person, there's 5 of us. So you kind of got like 50 hours of work across the team. But we've got 6 interns doing 10 hours a week for 10 weeks, which is 600 hours, right? So you basically got like a 10x output of like time spent relative to what we put in. So that's like the one like very easy analysis. And I think second for us is like, okay, after the internship, what value do we get from interns, right? Well, one is we've hired 4 interns as employees at Harlem Capital. So like that's directly tied for us, right? We've had 30 plus interns now go work in VC PE firms. So it's great co-investing opportunities. And even one of our interns is an LP in our fund. And so it leads to co-investing, leads to diligence references, et cetera. I think lastly, it's just more about like the mission of how do we create a more diverse ecosystem? And we've always known that like Harlem Capital can't be the sole diversity voice in venture. And so like if we can put diverse investors at firm and that one diverse investor can be from Harlem Capital, like that's great, right? And now we've got people at Lure Hippo, we've got them at Female Founders Fund, et cetera. And so like, it's really great to have interns at these places across the street to help be that diversity voice in the room. I think that's powerful. So like, that's like how I think about ROI impact, because yes, it is time consuming. We do it 3 times a year. Like it is a critical part for us as a firm. I think it's also a critical part for the ecosystem long-term, because we've essentially become probably the largest diversity funnel to venture capital at this point. There's probably, us and Kaufman, a few others, but Kaufman people are typically already in venture. Like we are probably the entry point more so for most people in venture. I know we're coming to the end. 2 quick topics we wanted to hit. Gabby and I went to conferences recently that I thought were pretty interesting. So wanted just to share some highlights from those. So I'll let Gabby start with her CalPERS conference.
Yeah, I loved it. So it was my first time at the Callus Conference put on by CalPERS and CalSTRS, the pension funds out in California. And imagine a room with allocators, so folks from different pension funds, endowments, getting to connect and meet with GPs. But what I loved about this is it was specifically focused on emerging managers and diverse managers. So it was great to see a lot of friendly faces on the GP side, but then also start to understand more about like what allocators and potential LPs are looking for, especially in a market that is a little topsy-turvy. And just like for founders, like fundraising right now is really challenging. And so trying to figure out, okay, if we're going to go out and raise our next fund or any fund in the future, like what do they really care about? How do you start to build those relationships and really connect about your mission and your vision and what you're doing and ultimately your performance. There were also a lot of really great sessions. So one of my favorites was with Jose Feliciano, who's one of our investors at Harlem Capital as well. And so I'll just share a couple of quick notes from that. The first was that he was sharing some lessons on fundraising and how do you build with your LPs. And a lot of it really just came down to like knowing your customer, knowing your stakeholder. In very few industries, I think, do you end up outsourcing that relationship to your customer. So I think the best example he kind of shared was like if early stage founders are doing founder-led sales, like as a fund manager, like that is your role. And it took clearly many years before they hired their first IR lead because the GPs and owners of the fund were really running the fundraising process and making sure that they always had a pulse on what LPs and allocators really cared about. The second that I thought was so applicable to us and how we think about our firm is that the most important thing when you're building your firm is trust and being able to build a really strong culture. And I know that's something we've taken a lot of pride in over the last couple of years of having an organically strong culture, but then taking the steps to really codify it and define it so that as we bring on new people, as we bring on our interns, they can really start to understand our values, our essence, and what we care about. There's a quote actually from a DEI lead at CalPERS who said that your most important assets ride up and down the elevator every day. And I love that as this visual of like, yeah, the most important asset in any business, in any team is your people. And so just really making sure that you're thoughtful about how you create culture, how you manage talent, to Henri's point about venture and some of the challenges a lot of funds face. So yeah, really inspiring conference. Exciting to see a lot of diverse managers in the room. And yeah, really pumped for where we go as a fund as we continue to fundraise.
And this was Gabby's first conference as a partner, and she was on the last podcast where we talked about promotions, but shout out to Gabby's promotion to partner and hitting up the LPs.
Guys.
excited to have one more body raise these funds.
Right in, trial by fire. But it's a ton of fun.
Great. No, it sounds like a good time. And I like sharing. We're really big on the team. Like we take notes on, even for conferences, right? We try to remember as much and take notes and then share with the team because we want the rest of the team to be in the room. That's like shared learning. And so I think wanted to do that for those listening. So for me, my wife was speaking at Essence Festival, which I did not know is the largest like gathering of people in the U.S. It's the largest convention, so it's 500,000 people, which Coachella is 300,000. But it's a massive amount of people who go to New Orleans. It's a black-led festival, and so like it was really empowering. One, to obviously see my wife like speaking in action, but like also just to see like they have food and wine stage, they have a movie stage, they've got a professional stage, they've got beauty and started with beauty, they have music, and so like seeing like just the culture come together. It's really like Afrotech, but like on steroids, because Afrotech is 10 to 15,000 people, so you're talking like a massive difference, and it was really inspiring. I think what was also cool for me, Rich Dennis, who sold Shea Moisture for $1 billion plus, he bought Essence, and so I went to a couple of his events, and like seeing Rich sell his company for $1 billion plus, and then buy like one of like the oldest, most valuable black brands, Essence, and then also buy a bunch of other stuff and like bring that together was really cool. And he talked about like his vision for Shea, and so like this was the first year that Essence offered coaching, which my wife is the executive coach, and so like he's really trying to like professionalize Essence, right? Because Essence started as a beauty and music festival, and now they're adding more, and he had a talk with 5 black mayors, the mayor of LA, Atlanta, New Orleans, Cleveland, and New York were all on stage. And it was like really cool to see like these 5 black mayors of massive cities on stage. Like Rich is being very intentional about that. It's like for me, what I really appreciated was like the visualization of seeing like how do you, once you've made it, so to speak, really give back to the community. I think in a way, like watching him walk around and talk on the microphone was like really inspiring for me to know like, okay, like there are people who can like make it and not forget where they came from and give back in such a tangible way, because Essence Festival is free. Right, so New Orleans gives them the convention center for free as long as they make it free to the public, which is why you have 500,000 African Americans flying to New Orleans to like take all these learnings and have fun for free, and it's super inspiring. So it almost felt like Wakanda, honestly. It was like super cool, and I've never been. I don't know if I would have gone if it wasn't for my wife, but I think something I'm going to consider on a go forward basis. But I think just being in those rooms is really impactful. I think a reminder for like people to be intentional. Whatever you are, you could be a person of color, you could be queer, you could be whatever it is, like, but find those rooms that represent you, because I think like those moments are like great re-inspiration moments for like you as a human, and there are others that are going through your path. I think that was really the takeaway for me.
I love that. And now it seems like we need a Harlem Capital stage at Essence Fest one year. So putting that out.
Yeah. Well, we know you want the Harlem Capital Diversity Awards.
I do. And not Diversity Awards. I want that to get everybody together, and it'll be a really good time to celebrate the ecosystem. So we'll see one day.
One day.
All right. Episode 2. As we say, we got to get back to work.
Yeah. We have jobs. I had to say
another week. I had to say it.
I love that. Well, bye.